video. My name's Latanya. Welcome to my channel, Smarty Style. And today I'm doing a sit down video, but this one for me is going to be a little bit different because normally when I do these sit down videos, I do have like notes that I want to refer to or the progression in which I want to talk about things, and I keep them in this notebook. Isn't it cute? This is from my friend Megan at Too Cool for Middle School. That's besides the point, but this one's going to be a little bit different because this one is, I haven't taken any notes. I don't have an outline of what I want to talk about first, second, third, and so forth. And because for this one, this topic, this was something that was hard for me to kind of outline like that. So hopefully this comes across and is very clear and doesn't feel like I'm rambling, but I just feel like this would be a more beneficial video if I just really spoke as naturally and as organically as possible. And if it turns into a hot mess, I apologize. So not too long ago, I put out, that's my dog Genesis running down the stairs. I put out a question on my Insta story asking you guys what are some topics you would like me to discuss for the upcoming school year, and a few of you mentioned classroom management. So I decided to do that because we're in the middle of the summer and classroom management is definitely something you want to have firmly in place, either on paper somewhere or in your mind, so that you're ready to go with that when school starts, especially if you're a new teacher. So I'm just going to share with you my approach and my philosophy to classroom management and what I think has been successful, and hopefully you guys can get some of that. Before I get into kind of like the nitty-gritty of my classroom management system over the years, I'm just going to talk about like my general philosophy on student interactions in relation to classroom management. So when I was thinking about making this video, the very first thing that I thought I wanted to say is I think the most important thing in classroom management is just remembering that your kids are human beings. And yes, you are in a certain amount of control of them, but in that control, you don't want to lose sight of the fact that these are people with emotions, feelings, and even though they're kids, they still deserve a certain amount of respect as a human being. And I do try and think about that anytime I'm dealing with a student situation. So the reason I say that is because a lot of times, especially if you teach older grades, like when I taught 5th grade, this was something I had to just remind myself more often than I do now that I teach a primary grade, is that even when you are dealing with a student that has just done something completely out of bounds, completely unacceptable, in your mind, totally unforgivable, you still have to remember that this is a person with feelings, and we don't really know what is going on in that person's life outside of our classroom. One of the things I appreciate most about my graduate education, I got my teaching credential, my master's at the same time, was a huge focus of the program. My master's, my big project was an ethnography study, and we had to pick about 5 to 7 students, I can't remember exactly how many, and we had to really get to know those kids in great detail. And not just them, we had to get to know their family, we had to go to their house, we had to interview them, their parents, we had to look in their bedroom, where do they eat dinner, all these things. And the premise is that when you do something like that, you realize that your student is a whole person with things going on. So when I say you got to remember that your students are human beings, it just means give them the same type of just basic respect you would want as an adult, as a human being. So when I've had students that have done just crazy things, the example that always pops in my mind is I had a student a couple years ago who had a reputation that was not necessarily the best reputation, and I had been told and warned and all of that, and I had him in class, and surprisingly I didn't really have that many issues with him, but one day I made a decision he didn't like, and he called me out of my name. Now that is jarring as a teacher when that happens. And so now when he did it, I didn't hear it. Like, I wasn't somewhere that I heard it, but I was told by several students right away, this student called you a blank. And my approach was, I gotta remember, as mad as I am right now, I was fuming mad, burning on the inside. As mad as I am right now, I need to take a moment to calm down so that when I talk to him, I am respecting him as a human being. So what I did is I went to him and acknowledged to him that I am aware of what he called me, but I told him at the time, I need to calm down, and when I do, I will come back and we will talk about it. In that moment, I feel like I respected him and treated him as a human being, even in the midst of what he done, by letting him know, A, I know what you did. B, I'm highly upset about it, but I am going to allow myself the time to calm down before I talk to you about any type of consequence, so as to make sure that when I do give you a consequence, it is one that came from a rational mind and not an emotional mind. And so I took some time, took a deep breath, and I think at the time, I didn't send him to the office, which surprised a lot of people, because a lot of people would be like, go to the office. But I just didn't want to do that with him, because I knew that that had been his experience up until that point. So out of respect for him, I took him outside and I asked him to tell me why he did that. Like, what was the reason for you to get to such a place where you're calling me outside of my name, and so on. So we had a conversation about it and we talked about it, and I let him know at the very end, and he was apologetic. Like, in the course of the conversation, by the end of it, you could tell that he regretted it and had some remorse. And in the end, I let him know that it was not okay, and that I wasn't sure what his consequence was going to be, but I still felt like it needed to be something. I said I was definitely going to let the principal know, because A, he used inappropriate language, and on top of that, it was toward his teacher. And so I talked to the principal about it, and I really wasn't for, you know, I surprisingly wanted to give him a less severe consequence than the principal. I think I wanted him to write a letter of apology, or I didn't want to give him a citation, but the principal chose to do that because she really wanted to document it. And so a situation like that, to me, is one of those times where you have to stop and think, okay, this is just not some bad kid doing something just to do it. There are other things going on that may have prompted him to do that, and I'm going to give him the respect of giving him an opportunity to explain himself, giving him an opportunity to maybe tell me the backstory of what led him to that, and talking to him not in an emotional state, which is what I was in the very beginning, but in a calm state so that I can hear him openly. So I think, bottom line, the foundation of your classroom management really has to be to remember that yes, these are kids, yes, you're an authority figure to them, but you still want to treat them with respect as a human, give them the chance to explain themselves, hear them out, don't just make assumptions about what they're doing and why they're doing it. Now, with that being said, on top of that, I will say my classroom management involves a lot of conversation. So if a child does something wrong, I rarely just say, okay, you did something wrong, I'm sending you to the office. Or, okay, you did something wrong, here's the consequence. It's always, okay, you did something wrong, let's go talk about it. Let's go outside and talk about it. Or now at my new school, we have this pod area, so let's go to the pod and talk about it. And I will give them the time that they need to really explain what they feel they need to explain, and I will listen, and then I will respond to them, and sorry, my dog almost fell, and they will listen to me. So though, like at the very base level, I think that that's what you got to do. And if you can start with that, the rest of your classroom management should kind of fall in line, because kids, even though they are kids, do pick up on the fact as to whether or not they feel like their teacher respects them, is willing to listen to them, is really willing to take into account their perspective, and that in turn makes your job easier. So that is my soapbox statement about respecting your students and developing that mutual respect. Now, in terms of my classroom management on like a technical basis or a day-to-day basis, when I taught 5th grade, we used in my grade level a ticket system. Now, I know I might say all this and some of you may respond and say, well, it's a punitive system as opposed to a rewarding system, and it totally was. And I'm not saying that it's right, but I'm also not saying that it's wrong, because it was very effective for us. So what we did is we looked at the citizenship categories on our report card, and I can't remember all of them right now, but that was what our classroom management was based on. And we had tickets for each of those categories. And there's a vlog that I did, not this past year, but the year before that, where I kind of go over this. And if I can remember which one it is, I will link it in a card in this video. So we looked at the citizenship categories, and there was a ticket for each of those categories. So for example, categories were like following rules and directions, completing homework, using time productively, respects others, and things like that. So if I had a situation in class and a student, let's just keep it simple, and let's say homework was due and a student came to school and they didn't have their homework, then they would pull an orange ticket saying that on this day I did not complete my homework. So they would go get the ticket, and they did this on their own. The tickets were color coded and stored in a easily accessible place in my classroom. They'd get the ticket, they'd put their name on the ticket, the date on the ticket, and on the back of the ticket, they would write specifically what they were pulling it for. So if it was a homework ticket, they would write the specific assignment. The key for me with that is I never filled out the tickets for them, and no one else filled out the ticket but the student. So that if a parent or a student ever debated, I didn't pull a ticket on that day, there's nothing more powerful and proof than saying, yes, you did, here it is in your handwriting. So they would fill out the ticket, they'd put that ticket behind their number on a pocket chart, and that ticket would stay there until it was time to collect and organize those tickets, and I'll talk about that in a second. And so that would happen in all of those categories. If I had a student that I felt was being disrespectful to others, then I would tell them pull a ticket, and you really didn't have to tell them what ticket to pull because they knew. Of course, prior to the ticket being pulled, there's going to be some warning, there's going to be some level of chance given, but if it's just gotten to the point where they're not responding to those warnings, or maybe what they're doing is so severe that a warning is, they've just jumped past that, then they'll pull the ticket. So they pull the tickets, and then every Wednesday, their weekly folders would go home. And on Tuesday, Wednesday would be the day where one of my students in class, their job was to go pull all the tickets behind everyone's number. And they would fill out this little form that would go home to parents, and it would have the student's name on it. It would list all the different types of tickets a student could pull. And if they pulled any, it would say how many of that category they pulled. So if a student pulled 2 homework tickets that week, there would be a number 2 next to the line that says completes homework. If they pulled 5 tickets for using time productively, there'd be a 5 next to using time productively. And if they pulled no tickets at all, there was a section on that paper that said, congratulations, your child did not pull any tickets this week. So the students would pull the tickets, fill those forms out, and they would file them in mailboxes, and then students would take those home on Wednesday. Their parents' responsibility was to look at the ticket report, sign it, and return the signed ticket report the following day, which for me was Thursday. If a student did not return the signed behavior report, they missed their morning and lunch recess, which sounds super harsh, because it is. But because it was so harsh, 99.9% of the time I got those signed behavior notices back. What I did when I got all of that back is I saved all tickets pulled for the trimester. So in my desk, there was a section where it was little envelopes that were numbered, and any ticket a student pulled got filed in there. Again, so that if a parent said, my child said that they didn't pull a ticket this week, I would immediately go in that envelope, pull it out, and I'd attach it to the note so that the parent could see it. And then I would save all those signed behavior notices, and I would save those for the entire trimester. That worked really well for me. What I really liked about it is when it came to report card time and I had to give citizenship grades, I had concrete proof or numbers to help me assign a grade in each of those categories. So not only did I save the tickets, but the tickets were tallied. So by the end of the trimester, I knew how many homework tickets a student pulled, how many following directions tickets a student pulled, how many uses time productively tickets a student pulled, and then I would take that total and I would divide it by the total number of days that we were in school in a trimester, and that would give me a percentage, and that was the grade I assigned them in my grade book. So there was no element of me just making up a grade based on how I felt about that student that day or what kind of mood I was in as a teacher, and I really, really liked it. Of course, there were some parents that didn't agree with the ticket their child pulled, but that was few and far between. So that's what I did in 5th grade. The key with any classroom management system is being consistent, being organized, and being able to back up whatever you did. So I was very consistent. Those weekly folders went home every Wednesday. The signed behavior notices were expected back every Thursday. The rules for pulling a ticket were the same. The manner in which you pulled the ticket was the same. I would even send a text every Wednesday to parents reminding them that weekly folders were coming home, and in that folder was the behavior notice that needed to be signed and returned the following day, and it worked like a charm. For those of you that teach older grades, like I taught 5th grade, and you know, at the end of the years when kids get a real loose and crazy, then my grade level moved to a point system, and basically kids had to have so many citizenship points in order to participate in each end of the year activity, and those points were based on tickets. So I'm not going to go into too much detail about that because I don't want this video to get too long, but if someone has a question about that as the end of the year comes, then maybe I can do a quick little snippet on that. It may be a little hard because I don't have these materials with me anymore, but for the most part we use a ticket system in 5th grade, and it worked wonders. It helped me stay sane, and it was great because I had students help me with it. Of course, they were not in charge of telling someone to pull a ticket or making decisions as to when those tickets were pulled. All they did was pull tickets out, tally them, file them. It was great. So if you can get a student to help you with like just the logistics of your classroom management, I highly suggest it. And you have to pick students that are responsible, and I would give them the speech of, it is not your job to just look at everybody's tickets and taunt people that pull tickets. And if that ever happened, which it never did, they knew that, you know, they would kind of get a talking to from me. Now, when I moved to 3rd grade, I immediately knew that I was not going to use tickets. So that's upper elementary. Now let's talk about primary elementary and what I did. I chose not to use tickets because of the fact there were some 5th grade parents that just didn't like the idea of tickets, didn't think their child should ever pull tickets, and I just figured if I had parents in 5th grade thinking their kids were too little to be dealing with that, then that is going to be multiplied by a great degree in 3rd grade. So I did not have tickets. There were no tickets to pull. I did have, however, the same categories, and I did have a clip chart, and that clip chart and I never got along. The clip chart in my classroom was a complete joke because I would forget to tell kids to clip down, clip up. I would forget to record where they were on the clip chart at the very end. I think by the middle of the school year or near the 3rd trimester, I completely removed the clip chart altogether, and the kids just laughed because they said, we don't have the clip chart anymore, because it was driving me crazy. But I kept the same categories, and instead of using tickets, I just put those categories in Class Dojo, because 3rd grade report cards and 5th grade report cards have the exact same citizenship categories. So my dog is making noise. Sorry. So if a child didn't complete their homework, then there was a category in Class Dojo where I would take a point or two for them not completing their homework, and their parents would be notified that way. And going forward in the next school year, I know for certain I will not have a clip chart. That will never even come out. I will strictly rely on tracking behavior through Class Dojo and letting parents see, okay, your child is pulled or is losing points for homework quite frequently, or your child is having some issues with using their time productively. And if it's an issue that I think is just extreme or happening all the time for a particular student, then I will reach out to that parent and let them know, and you know, set up a meeting with them if I need to. I am going to try and use Dojo dollars, but the only reason I'm going to try and do that is because I am roping my mom into helping me with that. And if not my mom, maybe a classroom volunteer. But I know that there's no way I could do that if I don't have someone that's kind of in charge of letting kids use their Dojo dollars to go and get, you know, something from the prize box. Because for me as a teacher, managing stuff like that, I'm not very good at it. I'm so focused on like curriculum and my lessons and teaching that a lot of times all the like fun stuff and the incentives, I'm not good with that. And this is my 14th year teaching, and it's been a struggle for 14 years. So at some point I gotta acknowledge that's my weakness and I need to get help. So that's what my plan is. I think with 3rd graders, I just don't think it's that serious. I think they're still at a place where they're much more eager to please. So having tickets is a bit much. And I think even for what I learned last year is they're just a little bit more sensitive than 5th graders. So even if their homework wasn't complete and I said, okay, you're gonna lose a dojo point, some of the kids just got really emotional, especially in the beginning of the year because they are so little and so young. And that was probably the biggest lesson I learned at the beginning of the school year last year, is that these are some little kids in comparison to my 5th graders that I would start the school year with. So the same applies with the 3rd graders in terms of talking to them and giving them the space to explain. Sorry, my video or my camera cut off because that clip was too long. I think what I was saying is still the same thing with if a student is having an issue, still take the time to talk to your 3rd graders or your 2nd graders or even your 1st graders, because you'd be surprised as to how well a child can articulate what's bothering them or what they feel was unfair or what they don't understand. And a lot of times talking them through that is the best thing that you can do, as opposed to just jumping quickly to having them pull a ticket or just taking a dojo point. Now, just because I talk to them about it and let them talk through it doesn't mean that I'm not gonna take a dojo point. It really just depends on what I learned by the end of that conversation. But as far as 3rd grade and classroom management, I think I'm gonna use Class Dojo. I'm not gonna have a clip chart in any way. And I'm gonna try and be better about offering more incentives with the whole dojo dollars thing and stuff like that. But I also, when I just have an issue with the student, and sometimes I don't take a dojo point, but it's just like there's some things going on, a lot of times I will just reach out to the parent and say, you know, here's what's going on, or request that they come in so that we can talk about it. And that has helped. So those are some tips that I have with classroom management, as well as some of the technical things that I've done in my classroom. I think my biggest thing is just allow time or make time to talk to the kids before giving them a consequence. Be consistent with what you're doing. And if something is not working, then stop using it. You know, like that clip chart was not working for me, so I had to stop using it because it was driving me crazy. I also think with classroom management, predictability in the classroom and consistency and structure is key. Like in my class, even in 3rd, they knew there was no question as to when they were going to be losing a point for homework. 5th grade, there was no question as to, do I pull a ticket for this? Or is Miss Robinson gonna make me pull a ticket for that? It was extremely consistent, extremely structured. And I think that makes kids feel much more, even in terms of a consequence, they just feel much more secure and stable when they know exactly what's gonna happen and how it's gonna happen. So that, I don't know, guys, because this was unscripted and unplanned. I really hope that this helped you in some way or gave you some ideas on what you can do with your class in terms of classroom management, or if you're a new teacher getting started, some things that you want to think about as you get your system together. And a lot of times you're going to be working on a team and they have a system, so talk to them and see what works. But again, in my experience, if someone's doing something that works really well for them and you know that it's not something that you think would work for you, or it's not something that you really believe in, it's okay to say, okay, I'm going to do things a little bit differently, in my opinion. Like, you have to run your classroom the way that makes you feel most successful and most consistent, and just kind of leave it at that. So I hope this video was helpful. If you have some more specific questions, leave them in the comment section. Otherwise, if you found it helpful and if you liked it, please give this video a thumbs up. Make sure you subscribe if you haven't already, and I will be sure to see you guys in my next video. Until then, I'll see you guys later.